The solution that they were using with generative AI not only provided them with answers, the company provided tech services. And so that means that they also needed to give code to their customers.
Mm.
Well, they'd always have to go back to developers. Well, now with generative AI, they didn't have to go to a developer to get the code that the customer needed. They could find the solution, answer the question in a good way, and they would also use generative AI to get the code that the customer needed to solve their problem. And they did that and reduced the amount of follow-up calls that they needed and the amount of time that the reps needed to do research, bringing in a significant savings to the organization and allowing them to scale their customer service.
And providing more value so they get more, reviews and, a brand and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Hi there, everybody. This is Mark Verbenkoff, and welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. This is going to be episode number 169, so we are definitely getting up there with the amount of podcasts that we have. And once again, we are touching on one of my favorite discussions, which is all about artificial intelligence, with a little bit more of a focus on generative AI today. And today it's going to be a little bit more of a kind of a practical perspective on not just how to use AI, but also understanding what type of companies are using generative AI, and also kind of getting a sense of the time frame of generative AI projects. So for those of you that are listening that own companies or are part of companies that are thinking about finally implementing generative AI, more so than ChatGPT, right? There's a lot of other use cases, which we definitely touch on in this episode. But if you're starting to think about how do we start to use or implement generative AI tools or solutions into the company, this episode is a little bit more for you today, right? So we do touch on a couple specific industries and bring up examples of specific use cases on where generative AI is actually used, so you can get a sense of, rather than just some general understanding of, generative AI is good for this, there's actual use cases that are brought into the discussion today to show where it is used and maybe more of the type of businesses that it might be more relevant for, which I think is not just interesting, but it's actually very useful to understand. There's also a bit of a discussion on the different types of companies that are using generative AI and that aren't, and understanding really the competitive advantages. So there's more details about how companies can get ahead and why they're getting ahead when using generative AI. And again, a little bit more focused on the relevant, tangible reasons as to why this is happening, rather than a general kind of esoteric or theoretical understanding, which again, I really love bringing into the podcast. And then, as I've already mentioned, there is a discussion on the timeline for how long these projects take to get up and running before there's an understanding of ROI for the companies that are using it. Again, so tangible, real use cases, real understanding. So my guest today is Kevin Dean. He is the CEO and founder of ManoByte. He has over 2 decades of experience in business process automation, CRM, and intelligent automation, driving significant growth for enterprises, which he obviously pulls from to discuss the points that I just touched on in the podcast today. Therefore, Kevin's data-driven approach has optimized sales, marketing, and customer service processes, making ManoByte a trusted partner for enhancing customer experiences. Kevin is also a renowned keynote speaker on automation and digital transformation, and he also actively engages in ocean conservation and enjoys surfing, boating, and scuba diving in Tampa, Florida. So again, I really appreciated the conversation today for its more practical approach for companies that are looking at implementing generative AI solutions. And I hope that all of you listening get some practical and tangible benefits out of listening to the conversation today. Thanks again. Hi there, Kevin. Welcome to the podcast today. Looking forward to diving into a little bit of business transformation and how AI is mixed into that. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. So thanks for taking the time to share your insights. And I also think that the conversation is going to maybe be a little bit more practical, like people can actually take away information rather than it being a little bit more, esoteric or philosophical, which I think I need to do a little bit more on the podcast. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, I'm super excited to have this conversation, and I guarantee that we'll provide some really practical information for people as getting out of this world of hype and what ifs and what can you actually do right now today. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Maybe before we dive into everything, was there like a unique experience or an event or something like that that got you into the world of business transformation, if we want to use that term? I know that maybe AI came later, but I think this was kind of like your first dive in, isn't it?
Well, not really. I tell people that we've kind of been doing this for a long time. Um, Before I started the agency back in 2008, I worked for two Fortune 500 companies. And we were doing back then um, lots of my background is computer information science. And actually, in school, we talked about artificial intelligence and data processing and all that stuff. So this is what we're talking about now isn't new. It's just now it's available. So it's gone from the theoretical to the actual. And, when I went and started our agency, it was really around this need to solve business problems, right? We wanted to solve business problems and help them be more effective with how they ran their business and how they grew and how they scale. And over the 15, 16 plus years we've been in this space, we've transformed as technology has transformed, and that transformation that we see looking ahead has always driven us to say, how can we help businesses who don't spend their time thinking about this all day, but they're dealing with business problems, customer problems? How can we give them an edge to be more effective in a practical way? So that's kind of what's driven us to get to where we are today. And now we're just excited that there are tools that we didn't have access to years ago, and even, a couple of years ago, that really are providing significant impacts to business and how they can operate.
Hmm. Very interesting. One of the things I want to double click on is these ideas of business problems, right? So you've been in the game a little bit longer than me. I started my business about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago. So I'm pretty fresh to all this. Been podcasting for a little bit longer than that. But have you seen the problems of businesses change or transform over time, or you know? Is business just business no matter what year or what decade you're in? It's kind of always the same. People are learning a crazy amount, kind of what's the expression? Drinking from the fire hose
Yeah.
in order to learn to do what you need to do in order to run a business. What's your perspective on that?
That is absolutely a great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before. And I I believe that there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Mm.
So we still have a lot of the same problems that we've had for a long time. They just come in a different package,
Okay.
right? They're just a different package. So we still have process problems, right? We still have people problems. We still have technology problems. We still have customer service problems. We still have operation problems. Um, those are the core that are the same, but how we go about solving them has changed, and sometimes the complexity of those problems have changed, which is interesting because we bring in certain technologies and they make certain aspects of our life easier, but they add another layer of complexity that you probably never thought about before, right? And so you may think, let me just kind of
Mm.
put a bow on this from a perspective of what we're seeing now. Um, People say, well, I want to leverage AI and automation to lower cost. Perfect. Yes. You can use AI and automation to lower costs, but there's a cost associated with that. So there's other costs that you now have to have. So you may lower cost in one area, but you still get other costs that are going to still be consistent. You can still do more. You're able to grow revenues, but you're not completely getting rid of, you're not eliminating that line item. It's just being transferred someplace else.
Hmm. And are you seeing like some of these costs or these changes more in the clients that you're dealing with? Like, I guess the question is there like a consistent thing that's being changed all the time when like AI, for instance, is being introduced as a transformative tool, or is it different from organization to organization? You know, like I had about the 100 first episodes of this podcast was all focused on technological unemployment. So my immediate thinking is labor and how it's impacted staff and how they're, you know, maybe concerned about being automated, or you know, do they think of it as an augmentation tool, or like what's your perspective on this?
Um, I believe that what's interesting to me is if you think about people that think about technology and labor and all these other things and where the shifts are, um, there are impacts that change. There, are, there's so many changes that shift all the time, right? And so it's kind of hard to quantify.
Mm,
But I do believe that, like, right, I think about people having a fear that AI is going to take away jobs. It's not going to take away jobs. It's going to change what we do on a day-to-day basis. And that's the difference, right? Um, and it's also going to give us the ability to be productive in a different way, right? And to see value in a different way.
mm,
So you give up one thing and it's something that maybe we've held on to for a long time and think, "Oh, I'm really good at this and I know how to do this and this is sweet and I feel comfortable." I think that's probably what I'm looking
mm,
for. Like there's
mm.
a comfort in what we've done. Like, you know, it's like my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I feel comfortable with that. But now I want to go for, you know, a steak and cheese, right? I'm still gonna feel full at the end of the day, but it's a different experience. So I think
Right.
that's kind of how I think about it.
Okay, okay, interesting. Should we move more on to like some of the more practical things? So, like I've had a couple guests come on to talk about some of the, let's say, industries that they're dealing with when introducing AI, and how those industry or those organizations within those industries are thinking about it. I've heard, for instance, um, you know, my competitor's doing AI, so I need to do AI. Help me do AI. Um, I'm assuming you've also come across this. Like, how are, I guess, the clients and businesses that you're dealing with thinking about artificial intelligence, business transformation in 2024, moving into 2025?
Yeah. A lot of the customers that are good fit for us are not customers who say, "Let me do I just because of AI," right? That's not good for them. It's not good for us. Um, and but the way we see value being added is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier. What's the core use case that you need to solve for? And I'll give you an example. So, a customer was having problems because they're a larger organization and they provide technical support for their product. And because they provide technical support for their product, they would have some reps who are seasoned, right? And they got a lot of experience. And when they bring on newer reps, they don't have that same experience. And but both the new and the seasoned rep will also spend a lot of time researching, trying to solve problems, trying to get the information that is needed to solve the customer's issue.
Mm.
Well, by bringing in AI, generative AI
Yeah.
specifically, um, they were able to do a couple of things. One, now everybody has the same access to the same knowledge. And because they all have access to the same knowledge, they're able to solve customers' problems quicker. And because they're able to solve customers' problems quicker, they improve the customer satisfaction. And the way that they're able to solve customer problems was because the reps, newer and younger, older and younger,
Mhm.
from an experience standpoint, were able to get to the answer quicker and provide the right solution for the customer, even though the customer's problem was complex and unique to them. And the solution that they were using with generative AI not only provided them with answers, the company provided tech services. And so that meant that they also needed to give code to their customers.
Mm.
Well, they'd always have to go back to developers. Well, now with generative AI, they didn't have to go to a developer to get the code that the customer needed. They could find the solution, answer the question in a good way, and they would also use generative AI to get the code that the customer needed to solve their problem. And they did that and reduced the amount of follow-up calls that they needed and the amount of time that the reps needed to do research, bringing in a significant savings to the organization and allowing them to scale their customer service.
And
So
providing more value so they get more, reviews and, a brand and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah. Um, to kind of slightly go back on the labor and technology aspect. So you're saying, I mean, obviously organizations have experienced and inexperienced people. Um, if clearly the experienced people are getting more money, higher wages than the inexperienced people, but you're able to use AI to kind of level the playing field. Do you have any insight as to how organizations are dealing with, somebody who's just started a job a month ago, but better at using artificial intelligence, and they might actually be better than the experienced person because they're able to query and search the database of the organization faster than somebody who's even got, most of the information in their mind, provide code a little bit faster? Like, has there been any, is generative AI too new that these sorts of things haven't been figured out, or is they like starting to think about like what's going on there?
yeah, I don't have any real data that I can credibly
Mm.
provide, right? I think everything is, we don't have enough yet. Um, but here's what I'll say, and this is where the misnomer comes in, right? Um, it's not that that senior rep is now the same as the junior,
Mm.
and therefore, like, it doesn't matter who you hire, because AI still has and will have a problem of hallucinations, right? And so now what these senior people do, they are able to go through and validate, oh, this answer was provided, but it's not correct. Well, now this senior person is now able to provide the knowledge that the AI tool needed in order for it to be more efficient, something that that junior person could never do. That junior person can't spot the inaccuracies, they can't spot the hallucinations, and they can't fix it, right? And so this is talking about the shift, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You're going to need these senior, more experienced people to be able to add value, and their experience will add a lot. Their roles will change, right? But they're still needed, extremely needed, and they play an extremely valuable role, just a different role.
Yeah, and maybe more so now than in the past, because you can train somebody up to be experienced. But if you have an experienced person, and if the new people are just constantly dependent on AI, it might actually be harder for them to spot the hallucinations in the future because the data that they're getting, like AI, I use ChatGPT every single day, multiple times a day. I mentioned that multiple times on the podcast, but I feel like it's becoming a crutch. Like, I used to be a pretty decent writer, and now I'm just like, oh, I got to write, 1,000 words. I'm just going to spit it out with ChatGPT. So I'm assuming that this is also happening in these organizations that are using AI quite a bit, which might give the older generation, the more experienced staff members, a little bit more value, or they can contribute more value to organizations.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's made people lazier. I honestly think that it made people better with a different skill set.
Mm, mm.
Um, like, we now have to be better teachers and coaches and editors of Gen AI, Whereas in the past, we had to be good coaches and trainers of people. Now we need to be good coaches and trainers of technology, right? Which is interesting, right?
Very much so.
And things change and evolve, right? And there is always going to be this human element that we're like, oh, this changed in our business, and AI is looking at it from an older perspective. We need to train it on these new things. And someone has to think about the vision and the future and what that looks like. It's because as of today, ChatGPT isn't creating that vision, right? It's taking and giving legs and flesh to the vision, right? Someone has to come up with that vision and paint the future. And ChatGPT is just a highway to get us there. And I'm saying ChatGPT as, Kleenex, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it could be Gemini, it could be Cloud, it could be, yeah, whatever. Um, so you were talking about the type of clients that you like to interact with already kind of have a vision or an idea of what they want to use AI with. They're not just like, hey, let's do AI. Um,
Yeah.
are
Not,
the
not really. So what happens with people that we interact from customers, they don't have a vision of how to use Gen AI. They have a business problem,
okay,
right?
okay,
So they have a business problem, and we say, oh, here's how you solve that problem. And by the way, in every solution, Gen AI is kind of a tool in the toolkit, right? It's not the full solution. It's a tool in the toolkit. It's like we can't have this conversation without having our computers, right? The computer's just a tool, right? That allows you and I to have this interchange. And that's what our customers come, the customers come down to the problems. And Gen AI is just another tool in the tool belt. That's all it is. Yeah.
and I mean, I guess this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning about these specific problems. Are you finding clients with more problems today than before? Like, have the problems shifted a little bit, and like are there specific AI solutions that are better for certain problems than others? I mean, I think there's a couple questions that can be
There are a
pulled
couple of
out of here.
questions.
Yeah,
The problems haven't shifted yet,
yeah,
right? And the problems haven't shifted yet, meaning that tech technology today isn't the cause for the problems. So the problems that customers had 2 years ago, they're still around. Now we can just get them to answers quicker and build solutions for them faster. So that's kind of that one piece. Uh, to the problems haven't changed, but as far as common problems that we see that are good use cases
yep,
for generative AI, there are several, right? Um, and I'm not going to talk about the ones that you hear all the time. You can use it for marketing, right? Let's not talk about those, right? Because that those aren't great. I will recuse myself next time someone says Gen AI to write your email. Okay, tell me something. So tell me something else from not 2 years ago. Um, but we talked about Gen AI is great at customer service. Right before this call, I was on the phone with our payroll provider, had a question about, some challenge we're having with payroll. And I'm like, man, they need to have, you know, a chat GPT, right? Generative AI chatbot to answer my question because they have the information, the knowledge, you know, but they're asking me 1,800 prompts to get me to, I don't really know the answer. Let me send you to a customer service rep. And then I went through 3 customer service reps before they could figure out, oh, this is why you're having that problem, right? Whereas with generative AI and solutions that exist today,
yeah.
um, could really have I could have said, "This is the problem that I'm having, give me," and it would have given me the answer immediately and gone and fixed it for me without me having to go and do it. So those are real solutions that exist today that many businesses should be like saying, "Oh, I need to adopt this because I can get it fast, I can get it relatively cheap, I don't have to build it or maintain it." You can do customer service, customer support solutions today that will transform your industry. Another case study, um, it is TripAdvisor. Uh, they use one of our solutions of one of our partners, and they have reduced um, calls from customer service by 95%.
Crazy.
I mean,
Mhm.
it's huge. So that's just one. The next area where I see there's a ton of value is internally and employee onboarding, offboarding, support, and operations, right? There are generative AI solutions that give employees everything that they need from a day-to-day basis. When am I gonna have my time off? How many vacation days do I have? What's my 401k? When am I eligible for this? All of these things that people are going back and forth with to HR, and they've gotta, like, get in line, schedule a meeting, right? Generative AI has the ability to answer those questions, like, for employees immediately. The onboarding process, making sure they have everything set up the way that they need it when they need it. The offboarding process, right? Taking away those manual tasks that, you've got to get the HR department, the IT department, all these people, right? There are solutions that can solve for those problems right now, today, right? Relatively quick, relatively easy, relatively cheap, right? That business can come in and change. You don't look at these as solutions to just reduce costs.
Hmm.
You the best way to be more efficient as an organization. Um, Another use case where we're seeing is legal and accounting, right? Um,
Everybody's favorite.
I mean, those are because both of those industries are 100% fact based, right? They're 100% fact based,
Mhm.
and there is a wealth of knowledge that every single large language model has access to. I mean, those are no brainers, right? So those are areas where you can get a lot done relatively quickly right away. So those are, I think, four areas that I think uh, businesses can look today to
Mm.
bring in a generative AI solution that makes them more efficient, provides value, and helps them be better.
Awesome. I've got two follow-up questions. The first one is from start to finish, and I guess it depends on, of course, the complexity of it, but how long are we talking about for a business to implement one of these solutions?
Yeah. So last week, 2 weeks ago, rather, I was at the Forrester conference in Austin, Texas, where in there were um, just to put at a level of size, right? A scope of organization. So these were companies that were, you know, I think probably 500 million in revenue and up, right? So those are the size of companies. All of them had, probably 1,000 employees plus. That's the scope, right?
Gotcha.
And so the keynote speaker, who is the CEO of Forrester, said, you should have 5 generative AI projects in flight today, with one of them going live in January,
Mm.
so 3 months. And he said, none of these projects for these large organizations should, these projects for them should cost 500 to $1 million, right? Which for that size organization is a drop in the bucket. So
Right.
pretty fast, not expensive, right? Easy to implement. So you're looking at a 3-month timeline for almost any project. Um,
Mm.
I'll caveat that in just a moment. A 3-month timeline, I think that's sufficient for almost any generative AI project. And it's going to be cheaper than you think,
Mm.
way cheaper than you think. With these caveats, there are costs associated, right? And there will be ongoing cost, right? So cheap is not free, right? Cheap is not free.
Mhm.
Uh, Number two, the big challenge with 3-month projects, it is possible. One, you need to know what you're building, why. And so sometimes building that use case because the way that people function in organizations today take you 3 months, right? You can't get in some organizations, they can't get consensus, right? It could be a 10 people a 10-man operation. They can't get consensus in 3 months
Sure.
on a direction, right? And that kind of expands when you go to some larger businesses. So you got to have the ability to say, this is the use case that we're going to solve for with this initiative. That takes time. Um, and then the other issue that you have to solve for first, or your generative AI project will fail, is data management.
Mm.
So, um, if don't look to if you just want to say I'm using Gen AI, then yeah, go get a off the shelf solution that uses Chat GPT and the documents that you upload. Right, you can have that up and running tomorrow. Sure. Is it gonna bring challenges to your business? Probably, right? Uh, but um, if you have to put in care to ensure that you have the data that you need to answer the right business problems that you're trying to solve for, and that data is accurate. Let me give you an example of a real issue, right? I'll give you two. Number one, you may have um, a document from 2024 that says, this is how you solve a problem.
Sure.
Then you have a document from 2020 that says, this is how you solve the same problem. Well, Gen AI doesn't know. Here's the problem. I have two documents that are telling me different ways to solve the problem, right? And it may guess the wrong one or the right one. Or it may combine the two, thinking, oh, I've got these two documents. Let's just combine them and give you an answer. And all three of those answers could be wrong because the true answer you haven't actually created the document or the process for. So that's why creating the right knowledge base
Mm.
is critical when you're trying to solve Gen AI projects. Uh, Another case study was consulting with someone in the government space. And they were saying, and we were talking about the problem of documentation, having the right documentation. And they said, well, the problem that they have in this government environment was they've got, 10 years worth of documentation that by law, all the way up to the federal level has to be maintained. Right. And all of those documents are right, depending on the question. And at times, all those documents have to be referenced in order to get to the right answer. Right. And so that presents challenges of,
Mm.
okay, they have data that needs to be kept up. It's not always up to date, but it has to not be up to date, but it has to be referenced and has to be referenced in the right time, in the right way, which brings complexity to a lot of those problems. So data is at the core of the biggest challenge that you have with generative AI solutions. And it's not just documents, it's about images, it's about text, it's about
Right.
all of that stuff, all about the data.
Right. Right. Okay. Super clear. I want to ask one more question, and I want to follow up on some of the ideas that were percolating up into my mind while you're speaking. You mentioned it was the Forrester conference that you were at.
Mhm.
From the people that you were interacting with, and maybe hands raised and questions and stuff like that, did you get a sense of, and obviously beyond the conference and in the work that you're doing, are you getting a sense of Gen AI adoption for the problems that you've been outlining, for the use cases that you've been outlining? Are we at like 1% of companies, 10% of companies, 80% of companies? What is the scale of the adoption? I'm assuming it's quite low, but correct me if I'm wrong. Or,
Yeah.
sorry, low and growing, I should say.
Um, it's it's surprisingly higher than you
Mm.
think.
Okay.
It's surprisingly higher than you think. Um, there are a lot of companies who are adopting Gen AI solutions at quickly.
Mm.
So it's actually higher than you'd think. It was surprisingly high, surprisingly high. Um, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but they did provide that information.
Do you have like a range? Is it like 10%, 80%, or is
It's like in the
oh,
35 to
okay.
50% range. Like that's kind of that block of
Yep.
companies that have already adopted it. Um, now successfully implemented innovative projects extremely low, right?
Mm.
Uh, but let me explain why. And I would venture to say that probably by the end of this year, um, I mean, you'll be able to say that businesses will be able to say, yeah, we're doing it. And here's why. Um, for the past 4 years, at the beginning of each year, I send out a request to customers, current, past, to have a one-on-one with me and discuss their plans and their future vision for the following year. And one of the questions that I've been asking for the past 4 years is, um, what are you doing with Gen AI? So 2 years ago, well, not Gen AI, just AI in
Yeah,
general,
yeah.
just AI in general. And and it struck me a couple years ago. There's a customer. I'm thinking specifically about a Gen AI solution that I wanted to introduce to this customer. And I said, "Hey, um, what are you doing with AI?" And he's like, "Kevin, we've been using AI. You know, you manage our HubSpot. We're an elite HubSpot partner because you manage our HubSpot, and there's a ton of AI features in the platform." And they were right, right?
Mhm.
Um, so HubSpot has had a lot of AI features in their platform for a long time. Um, and so the customer said, "We're already using it," right? I'm like, "Oh, yeah. What we may be thinking about from a, hey, Gen AI and what it can do,
Mm.
customers and companies are thinking about it completely different." And so so it's not just HubSpot, Salesforce, right? They have a- Gen AI now
Yep.
in their product suite, right? A lot of the tools that are out in the marketplace, Monday.com, ClickUp, Notion. I'm a big Notion fan. All of those platforms have Gen AI built into their product set. Um, you know, almost any company that has a SaaS-based CRM, regardless of what it is, that CRM, if it doesn't already, will have
Go on.
Gen AI built into it before the year is over. Um, Last week, at the HubSpot conference of Inbound, they launched a whole suite of Gen AI tools called Breeze, already built into the product, ready to go. And those tools are actually pretty cool, right? Gen AI Copilot that look into your data on the CRM and give you information. They have AI chatbots that you can put forward facing using Gen AI, right? Gen AI to create marketing materials, Gen AI to create content like automatically generating podcasts for you, right?
Sure,
Type of
sure.
content automatically does it. Like it has a full, robust suite of Gen AI tools, including Gen AI agents, which honestly, they're ahead of everybody with agentic AGI, you know, AGI because that's another whole nother level. But HubSpot's actually ahead of the game because they're already looking at agents and multi-use agents to be able
Mm.
to multi-step agents, right? And so that's pretty cool. So, and HubSpot has 250,000 customers. So, after this week, there's 250,000 companies that will say, yeah, we've got Gen AI. We're using Gen AI because that's the scope that they're looking at it.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, and
so
sorry,
it's like,
but I guess my question then is that truly utilizing Gen AI as you were discussing? Like, it sounds like what you and, some of my other podcast guests are actually saying, it's a little bit more substantial than, I have ClickUp right here on my other screen is like, fill in this description with Gen AI or with AI. It's like, okay, cool. I've got ChatGPT over here. I can kind of do the same sort of thing. Like I'm using Gen AI, but it's not a substantial integration into my business in that sense compared to what you were saying.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's not yet, but it can be.
Mm.
And especially when you think about it from the standpoint, and I would think that you 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 have to look at it at a standpoint from the Gen AI purist to what businesses actually think and what they actually are going to implement and how they're going to implement. You are going to have some and a number of businesses who will use Gen AI to innovate, to use it as a competitive advantage, right? To be way better and to bring out solutions that don't exist today. That's the cool thing that we like doing, and maybe some of the podcast people are talking about all these cool things that you can do, which I love geeking out about that.
Sure.
We wanted to talk practical today. Uh, and so there's going to be a group of companies that do that. Not everybody, but a group of them. But I believe it's like, we used to have customers who would build their own application, right? Uh, No one builds their own application. And the ones that do are because they have this developer who's, if they love, and he loves building applications, and they're never going to convince him not to build an application. And he's got the conspiracy theory why the cloud is really bad.
Sure.
Right. And so, right, and I think that we're gonna have those Gen AI peers feel the same way. They're like, no, 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 you're not doing Gen AI unless you're building it your own. Like you gotta be, creating the prompts and you gotta know, how to do all of this fine tuning and, prompt engineer. Okay, yeah, maybe. But businesses who are gonna use it on a day-to-day basis, they're gonna lean into existing vendors to provide them with the solutions that they think that they're going to need from an operational day-to-day solving their current business problems. But those who look to leverage it at a different level, they're going to take it a couple steps further.
Well, perfect. That's a segue into the response that I wanted to give. Listening to your description of the problems and the use cases and kind of the benefits. I talk a lot about AI and Gen AI on this podcast, and to me, it really sounds like the companies that are able to utilize, whether it's like a HubSpot Gen AI or a fully integrated, Gen AI, what was it called, like Second Brain or something like that. From the descriptions that you're giving from others that I've heard, it really sounds like they are going to be able to leave their competitors in the dust because of just how much more efficient their organization is going to run. I was I worked in Barcelona for about 6 years, and I was the 16th employee, and then we grew to about 60 by the time I left. And you're talking about having to go to the HR and talk to them, schedule a meeting. And it gives me nightmare flashbacks of all this wasted time. And I've got these multi-million-dollar projects that I'm organizing. And I have to spend an hour or two to go and get one bit of information from my HR manager. And if I can, project that into the future, if these organizations just I don't know, type a Slack message or talk to your AI and you get that information, then you can continue going compared to the organization of the past. Like there's no competition. Like you're done. Yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit blown away by all this, and I talk about it all the time. It's very exciting. Um, you're seeing this with your competitors, with your clients, right? Like they are massively outcompeting. And
Yeah, they are.
yeah,
They're performing.
yeah.
100%.
So interesting. I guess another question here is for those organizations that are implementing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these Gen AI integrations and solutions, and they outperform their competitors. This is going to cause a run, which I guess you're starting to see now at that conference and with all your clients, that there's going to be a bit of a tsunami of organizations trying to implement and integrate Gen AI and AI solutions in general. Is the new race just about who can integrate AI faster?
I believe that the answer is yes.
Mm.
Well, the answer is hands down yes.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of things that we haven't talked about that we've got to talk about. Um, so number one, you can only go as fast as the people that you have to get you there. And there is a shortage of Gen AI trained, knowledgeable individuals, right? You and I talk to people about this all the time, but we are kind of, the top 1% of people who understand,
Sure.
the things that are needed. Right. So there's a whole nother skill set that organizations need and they don't have it. So people is a big, big issue. But then we've got to talk about the two words that nobody likes to talk about, and that's governance and security.
Yeah.
So, um, not naming names, but one of the organizations, I'll say, in Las Vegas, um, had someone um, use Gen AI to, impersonate the CEO
Oh yeah.
and get, 250 million plus in cash, right? Those are real things that are happening today, right? Another scenario, um, a chief financial officer was invited to a Zoom meeting with the CEO. It wasn't the CEO, right? Right. And they did a wire transfer of millions of dollars based on the conversation that they had with. Those are real, right? Um, you know, I get a call that says, "Hey, Kevin," and it sounds like the people that I know from the number that I know, and it's not, the person that I think that it is, right? Employees are able, you know, people are able to now, you know, impersonate an employee and get access to company information, right? Because of Gen AI. Um, these are real threats, right? So then you've got, well, how do we govern, right? Because within the organization, you got somebody using Cause, someone using ChatGPT, someone using Copilot, uh, and they're all pulling from different data sources. And I just decided that I'm going to use it this way and I'm going to use it that way. And now you're delivering disjointed experiences, wrong information, that you aren't pulling from the right data sources. This department decides that they're going to implement it this way. Another department decides they're going to do it this way. These are all issues and challenges that are real and significant that you've got to address in order for companies to be successful. And because there is this real issue of governance, security, I believe, and the research is saying that while it's going to speed up, maybe for the next 6 months, it's going to slow down and almost come to a screeching halt for a bit as people struggle with the risk and the security concerns because there truthfully aren't a lot of regulations and safeguards that are honestly available.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was familiar with one of those examples, and I've spoken about it before. It's I think it's chilling for business owners who put in so much effort and so much time and blood, sweat, and tears and all that, and then some kid or some little group comes around with some deep fake, and they're able to swindle your hard-earned money, which also then affects your employees and investors and all the rest of it. And as we didn't talk about it too much, but obviously technology is going to get cheaper and easier to use. So, anybody could essentially create a deep fake in the next 10 years or something like that. And if there is no like security protocols, or I think one of those organizations that had the 25 million or 250 million extracted from them, they are now kind of like the best use case, and they have the best practices on how to avoid that to happen. So I think there's like a 3 security checks or something like that for anything over 5 million now, something like that. But I think these types of things are going to be developed through a lot of pain over the next couple of years. And yeah, you're right. It might slow things down considerably, because if this is going to happen over and over and over again, there's going to be a lot of hesitancy to adopt and implement.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 things I wanna kind of tie together that you said. Some kid, right?
Yeah.
And I say that because, um, I've got 2 kids, 11 and 14. Um,
And how many CEOs have they swindled using deep fakes?
none,
Yeah.
none. But they probably could, right?
Yeah.
They probably could, right? If because they know how to use Gen AI. They've been using it all their life, right?
Sure.
My kids walk around talking to Alexa all day, right? Um, they know how to use ChatGPT. They've been using it just as long as I have, and it's second nature to them. It's just like, oh, this is how you do things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. They know, like, they know how to go out and create, their a clone of their voice. They know how to go out and create a clone of themselves. Right? So the technology for people to go out and it's available today. Like, anybody could go out and Google how to create a deep fake and have it done within hours.
Sure.
Anybody should do that, right? And so, I think that it's like we've got this. It's amazing. It's scary. It's cool. It's a completely new world. But these are the same issues. Going back to what I said earlier, there's nothing new under the sun. These are the same issues that we had when the internet came out. I'm old enough to have been around when it did, right? But they're the same issues, right? It's just a different technology now. And I think the same growth of change and the difference that we've seen since the internet blew up is what we're going to see right now, right? So yeah, I'm going to see it again.
Well, I honestly think that that's maybe a perfect place to end the conversation on. We're looking a little bit forward into the future and maybe what's going to happen, and giving some people a little bit of food for thought, as I always say, fascination and terror kind of simultaneously, as I think the best mindset to have going into the future and thinking about these, Gen AI, but also many of the other emerging technologies that are coming out there. Kevin, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure. It certainly gave me a better perspective of what maybe some of these larger organizations are actually thinking about and actually doing, which is obviously very useful, and I hope very interesting for a lot of the audience. I'll have your LinkedIn and your website up on the show notes of the website. Are there any other places that you want people to reach out or follow what you're up to?
Yeah, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and check out our website, ManoByte.com, and we'd love to just answer any questions that you have and help you think about how you can plan, design, implement, and scale your AI initiatives.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you very much for your time and your insights. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, great talking to you today. It was a lot of fun. See you, Mark.
See ya. Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society. They're simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, The fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.